Here is the Radio City Weather Watch. Although England and Wales will start this evening dry with little or no clouds, fog is expected to return to many areas tonight, and slight to moderate frosts will develop in areas away from the west coast. Tomorrow will again be cloudy with some sunshine, and for a lot of people, it'll be a dull day.
Many thanks indeed, Ross, there, for the weather. And as you've probably heard, ladies and gentlemen, our Managing Director, Mrs. Dorothy Calvert, was fined £100 today at Southend, and has stated that she'll not appeal against the findings of the case, which means tonight, of course, at midnight, Radio City goes off the air for the last time, apparently, because we're operating within territorial waters. And during the next 60 minutes or so, through until that final hour of midnight for us at any rate, we'll be talking to all the various disc jockeys on duty at present on the station. That's Alan Clark, Ian McRae, Paul Kramer, and RWB. And I think that perhaps at this time you might like to meet the boys off duty, as it were, and find a bit more about them in Radio City, away from the turntables. And we have all the lads, in actual fact, in the studio right now, all the DJs. We have Alan, we have Ian, and we have Ross, and not forgetting Paul. I don't know who's going to start off the conversation. I would explain to you that I'm in a different part of the studio, and they're sort of just behind me, and I can't really see what they're doing, but I'll switch up the switch, lads. Don't say anything naughty, because you're on the air, okay? Wrong. Who's going to start off the findings?
Alan. We've elected Alan.
Okay. Alan, well, let's...
Step forward, lad.
If I can fire the first question to you, Alan, a lot of people ask us how we sort of make it into commercial radio. Can we have a bit of, your sort of past history, how you first came to the station? Because you've been with us, just over a year, haven't you?
About 14 or 15 months, yes. Good evening, by the way, good evening. How did I get into Radio City? Interesting question, long time ago now. I think it started October 65, and I was listening to the station one day. I listened to the station quite a few months before I actually joined, and this charming young man came on the air and said, "We have a disc jockey vacancy. If you think you are suitable, please write in and send a tape." So I thought, well, I'll have a go. I would never get the job, but I might at least try. There's no harm in trying. So I did try. Sent in a tape, and 3 months later, I got a little letter saying, "You might possibly be suitable. Come out and have a go." So I did, and here I am. That's how it happened.
Well, that's very interesting. I don't know, lad. Alan, do you have any particular sort of taste in pop music that you like listening into when you're doing a program? Are there particular artists that you like going for in a bigger way than others?
Sounds corny, but the Beatles. Yeah, that's old-fashioned these days, but I still like the Beatles. And I got quite a taste for rhythm and blues as well.
I will point out to you that if any of the other lads sort of who are in the studio at the moment you want to sort of butt in, please do so, because the show is more or less our own in its final hour. Alan, let's keep with you just for a couple more moments. What do you think about today's findings, over there in Southend?
Hard to take it in at first, in my case, Radio City has been my life for the last 15 months, interruptions here, and to be suddenly told a few hours ago that I said at midnight, you can't really take it in. I think it's very sad, and I think quite a few million people are going to be deprived of a very valuable service, I might tell you. Very sad indeed, I think.
Ian McRae, in actual fact, has just walked in. He's been searching the record library for a certain record.
I've got an idea, Tom. Why don't we all get together in the studio and do a program till midnight? It's a farewell thing, and...
sorry, we're doing it, are we?
He keeps his sense of humour till the end.
Ian McRae has joined us. I wonder, Ian, if we can sort of pass... if we can pass on to you now, Ian.
Yes.
How do you think Prime Minister Wilson is taking this event to Radio City at the present time?
Well, as Prime Minister of your country, I have some very interesting, forthright things to say, but I can't think of any.
I think we've already had a few words to Alan already, and of course it was Alan and Ian who started
Wait for it.
the most popular
Hello.
the most popular program, which of course we're all very pleased for them about, because it reached, number 18 in the popularity polls in the Record Mirror, and that of course was the Auntie Mabel Hour. Even I don't quite know how the Auntie Mabel Hour started up, lads. Can you and Alan sort of inform us how this first all sort of came about, the Auntie Mabel Hour?
Looking back to the past, no, I can't remember. What did happen?
Can't you?
No. What did
I'll
happen?
tell you what happened before we even thought of you actually thought of the title program, but one morning on coffee break,
I've just been to the toilet, actually.
These technicians, they're
Get
getting
them
everywhere.
everywhere.
Yeah, one morning on coffee break, myself and the McRae trick sort of joined forces, and did a load of rubbish, really. But a lot of people thought it was funny.
Usual coffee break stuff.
And our station director said, well, look, would you like to get together and make this a regular thing? So we did, and
So we said no. What about some extra money? So he said yes.
we got an extra $2 a week, and it happened, didn't it?
It happened from there on, yeah. And that was the birth of the Auntie Mabel Hour. Before the Auntie Mabel Hour actually started on as a regular program, we did have a mythical character called Auntie Mabel. Of course, Auntie Mabel is completely a figment of my... Oh, no! Hello, boys! How are you? She's fainted again. She's in a bad way tonight because we've taken her out of a little tower across there, dragged her across in the cold night air, and now she's fainted. I'm very sorry about that. She can't take the gin like she used to do in her old days. She's getting on a bit now. She's 155, on the left ankle. We were just talking, Ian, how the DJs first joined the station. I think Alan joined the station before you, and then I always remember this. It was not a very calm day when you first came out to the
It was a rough day
station.
at sea, Captain. It was foggy and rough, and I was sick.
And I saw this rather sort of pale-faced sort of young gentleman coming up on our lift onto the station. That wasn't the result of the trip, I can assure you. It was like the 3 weeks in London, mate. And he'd only just arrived in town. How did you first come over to this country, Ian? On a big boat. Yeah. But you must have come over for a particular purpose. Apart from that, what other purpose did you come over to this country for? I don't know, really. I was in a pub, about a year and a half ago in Australia. I was. This is very true. This is true. And this is nothing unusual. I was speaking with a friend of mine, and he said, I'm getting a bit sick of the scene here. Let's see what's happening on the other side of the world. So we did. And next day I signed up, and here I am. And when I sort of came round next morning, I thought, my God, what have I done? But it's too late. I've signed up, so here I am. That's true. That really is true. That is a true story. I had a bit of trouble locally. I used to work in a radio station over there, and we used to have a flat, you see. I used to share this flat with a friend of mine who was also a DJ. Be quiet. And we had a few parties and things, and we sort of became rather notorious with the locals. They weren't very impressed with us. And the nice mayor said, would you leave? On this I thought I'd better go somewhere, and I did, and here I am. Now I'm sorry. Yeah. Let's get on to another DJ who came after Ian McRae, and that was Paul Kramer. When you say after me, you don't mean after, you mean, I mean following you on the station. Yes, indeed. I'd like to clarify that point, you see, because I've got a lot of girlfriends. And all the boys in that here say no. I will just point out to you, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you're wondering what's happened, it's not late date gone mad. Late date always has gone. When I'm awake, that is. But as
Whatever happened to sanity?
Yeah, as you've probably heard.
Was he out here?
On radio, television, and probably it's been in the newspapers as well. Unfortunately, Radio City goes off the air finally tonight for the last time. But don't let's get too depressed right now. Let's get on to the next DJ who's sitting around our little round table in the newsroom at the moment. That's Paul Kramer. Now, I first met Paul in the London office, and he was just coming out to the station. Paul, how did this all come about?
He doesn't know. How did it all come back? Well,
let's have it. What were you doing before you joined Radio City, and what made you come into commercial radio?
That.
well, for about 2 years I worked with a film company, from anything as a sound recordist to a film director. And I sort of got in a bit of a rut with this job.
What was her name?
And I felt... right, yes. He never stopped, does he? And I thought, commercial radio, yes, this is great. Let's have a bash at it.
He's banging ever since.
So this was it, After an audition tape being sent in, they said, we'll go out for a trial. And so far I've never been off the station.
Just got a trial.
I'm still on 6pence a day.
You're not now, mate. Well, look, I'll tell you what we'll do, ladies and gentlemen. Before we sort of go on to our other DJ who's on the station at the moment, RWB, don't really know his real name.
He's gone off me.
Just shaving his beard off, is he? Alan, you have got a particular record that I believe you want to see. Can you tell us something about it?
Yes, well, it's my only claim to fame. This is the longest running theme song on this station.
God save the Queen's the longest.
No, it's not. No, it's not. Isn't it? No, that's a new one. The theme...
When we started to crawl back in about, the mid of last year. We crawled a bit, didn't we? Shut up. Sorry.
The theme is Sunshine, Lollipops and Rainbows, but I don't want you to play that one now. The instrumental, I want you to play, please, the vocal version by Jack Jones, I think.
sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows.
Jack Jones there and Sunshine, Lollipops and Roses. Sorry about the jump at the end of the record, but we have this new studio at the moment, ladies and gentlemen. Seems a pity and diabolical shame that it's a new studio and that we're going to be coming out of it very soon. But every time somebody comes in the studio and they slam the door, like somebody who did just then and remain nameless, the record jumps. Let's get on to our WB. He's the most recent recruit to Radio City DJ-wise. Ross, yes. Like Ian, your sort of fellow Australians, which part of Australia do you come from? Do you any Ian, come from the same place? Is it Melbourne, isn't it?
No, I don't come from Melbourne, actually. I'm from Sydney.
Yeah.
That's where my parents live. Although it's not the last place I was working. I was actually born in Queensland. It's all very complicated. I've moved around because the tax people have been after me for a while. And I've had to keep moving.
He doesn't care.
I was working in Sydney. Originally, I started on radio in Sydney. Did 6 years with a large Sydney station. Took up being a DJ and went to 2BS Bathurst, which is in New South Wales. And then I went to Tasmania and worked in Hobart, where all the big bushfires are at present. From there, I went to, where else did I go to? 2XL Cooma, which is the last place I was working in. From Cooma, I left Cooma and came across to England.
Have any experience in radio?
Who will?
That's not a bad idea. Well, what's your impression of the sort of the radio scene over here, Ross? Do you find there's a great big deal of difference between radio in Australia than there is in this country?
Oh, well, there's always bound to be a difference. Every station you go to is different. There's a different policy and a different feel for radio. I was quite surprised when I came over, knowing that commercial radio had only been going for 3 years over here. I was quite surprised to see so many guys with talent doing so much in 3 years. Well, and a lot of them, quite a number of people in radio over here, and on the station included. There's English guys working on the station here that have got more talent than guys who are big names in radio in Australia.
Yeah. Bob Menzies. That's right, you shouldn't have said that. Okay, well, we've more or less introduced you to all the DJs who are out here on the station at the moment. Let's get on to another subject. People are usually asked this if they're in radio or on television or on stage.
Tom, can I just interrupt you a minute?
Yeah.
And ask how you came to join the station?
Yes, tell us, Tom.
Yes.
Come on.
Well, it's a long story now.
Going down Piccadilly one.
It's a long story, that's all. Let's quiet for Tom. Yes. Well, I'd always, in actual fact, been interested in radio, and with the sort of advent of offshore radio stations, I became even more interested. I first started on the stage, believe it or not, as an actor, which I wasn't very successful at. Somebody once said to me, "You'll be a pretty good actor, but you won't be an excellent actor," and I wasn't content with this. If I can't be good at that particular job, I didn't want to know about it. So I left the sort of legitimate stage and then sort of went into a bit of television, which I enjoyed, and then I came into radio. I always remember I was sort of ringing up various stations and sending in tapes. This is the ultimate aim, I think, that if you want to get on in radio, you've got to sort of send in tapes, and if people say no, don't take no as an answer if any budding DJs are listening in, and I hope they aren't, because there's going to be 4 or 5 of us out of work, and we all want to work, you see. And I sort of sent in a tape one day to Radio City, and I think it was about 3 or 4 months later, the telephone rings, and it was Reg Calvert, who, of course, used to own the station, and he rang me up at my home in Norwich and said, "We seem to think you've got a reasonably good voice. Maybe you'd like to come out for a weekend's trial on the station." So I sort of packed my bags, came down to Whitstable, and I've been living in Whitstable ever since, and I've been working on Radio City ever since, and I've enjoyed it. And I'm not being sentimental when I say this, lads. No knocking around. I'm not being sentimental when I say this, but take it from the bottom of my heart, and I mean this, that thank you very much indeed, lads, because you're one of the nicest group of boys I've ever had the pleasure to work with, and we must keep in touch, All the very best to you, whichever way it sort of works out,
What can you say? I mean, maybe, Tom, after we've been talking about this, maybe we could sort of go on to the subject of what the boys out here intend to do when, after today. It might be interesting to discuss it.
Well, Ian has been asking me where Whitstable Labour Exchange is, and I've been asking Ian where it is. But,
Well, I'd like to say this. Commencing audition tape in 5 seconds from now.
My name is Ian McRae, and I've had experience in radio and other places.
Oh, sorry.
Well, something which Ian mentioned to me earlier on is, as I was saying before I was rudely interrupted, is that usually in television and radio, if you're on the stage, there is a particular situation which has happened to you, something diabolical which has happened to you, or something very funny that's happened to you while you've been on the air. Has anything peculiar happened to one of the lads out here? I can think of hundreds of things myself.
Tom, tell us a bit about the sound effects we dubbed into the news tape.
This was quite recently, in actual fact. Unfortunately, our managing director didn't hear it, because we might have been off the air sooner. But this is a thing that happened a few weeks ago, and I was just coming on to do the Just Go program in the morning, and Ian was reading the news, and I said something about Ian's age, which is a really terrible thing to do, because somebody being as old as Ian McRae, you shouldn't really mention his age. No, really.
That isn't very fair, you know, because I'm still virile.
And he
folks, are still good for it.
And he took this as rather an offence. It was only supposed to be a joke, but he said to me, as he walked out of the studio, he said, "Edwards, I'll get you sooner or later."
I did more than that, Tom.
Yes,
you know.
you did, but I can't say that over the air. And by 1 o'clock, you see, when I've come off duty and I'm then doing the news for the rest of the afternoon, I've forgotten about this particular experience. And I'm reading the news, and we have an opening jingle, which you probably know about on the station for the beginning of our news bulletins. And I couldn't make out why Ian McRae seemed so anxious to panel these switches for me. You see, I thought he's either trying to be very kind or he's going to do something diabolical, which turned out to be, because as soon as the news jingle had finished, and I started to read the news, and it was something very, very serious indeed. The sound of a toilet flush came over the airways of Radio City, which I shall never forget. And of course, there's all the lads who are having their lunch at the moment, you know, sort of laughing, their sides open. But that wasn't all. When I came to the end of the news and let the catch go, to have the end phrase of the news thing coming out, that didn't come out. But what did come out? It was
one of those crazy goon fanfares, the blood knock one, you know, with a big explosion on the end. Oh, no more fried egg for me.
And that was one of my funny experiences. It might not sound funny now, but how I got through that news I'll never know. But there must be something else which has happened to the other lads on the air. Something which I can remember, which Paul Crown will probably tell you about. Do you remember that day when Eric Martin, who's on shore, good evening, Eric, if you're listening in, do you remember that day on the station, Paul, with the cream horns?
Yeah, very clearly.
The what?
The cream horns. We were sent out some
Thank you, madam.
delicious cream horns, which are packed tight with about 3 inches of this very, very thick cream. This was sent out by somebody, and this time we were in the old studio on the other side, on one of the other towers. And
he doesn't care. He's queuing on the
no. And this is also when we had to swap over. We didn't have a separate newsroom. So poor Eric, I came off the air, and Tom was going to follow me, and Eric was going to read the news in between. So I came off the air. Last minute dash, Eric had about 3 seconds to get in the chair, get everything queued up and read the news. So we let him read about halfway through the newscast, and then when he got round to the weather, because we did have a bit of respect for him anyway, and when he came to the weather, Tom had one of these cakes, you can imagine it, one of these cornets, like ice creams, if you imagine the ice cream as cream, thick cream, and if you can picture now Eric sitting up this console, intrigued with the weather. You know, he really does get carried away. And all of a sudden, Tom walks in front of him and just plonks it on his forehead. There, and it sticks. And it's like I don't know,
a cream horn on your forehead can be living hell. A unicorn.
Yeah. Especially when you're reading the Eric.
And of course, Eric...
to a eunuch.
Yeah, Eric collapsed. We collapsed. And I think it was dead air for about 2 minutes.
Yes. What about you, Ian? Ian, of course, is what we like to call the comedian of Radio City.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
No, it's not nice to be nasty, is it? No. Well, you should know. Ian, there must be a particular...
I can't think of a darn thing. What's happened? There's been so many. The what? The chicken.
The chickens in the...
We're talking about here, sir.
Oh.
Is there any particular...
It's been just 1 year of gags, you know. But I can't think of one right now. Except what?
Perhaps why did you think I could tell you one that's happened to me, also in the same studio? I think this is, you will remember, this is following an Auntie Mabel hour, which is chaos anyway. And I came on to read the news this time. We had the same trouble, you know, swapping in the chair. And Ian always leaves it to about 3 seconds before the end to get into the chair. So it's a terrific scramble, you know, the biggest mess you've ever seen in your life. I come crashing into the chair, you know. There's no pips, there's no nothing. It's dead air for about 4 seconds. Out of breath, I come on and say, here's the 8 o'clock news, you see, and straight into the pips. Well, this is fine. And we get through about halfway through. All of a sudden, we wear headphones. All of a sudden, my headphones just fall apart and hang around my neck, you see, which is a bit disconcerting anyway to start with. Now, not only do we have Ian McRae in the studio, we also have Ian West. Now, if you put these two together, everyone out here knows what happens on the station. I think the majority of listeners know what happens. Chaos. Well, Ian was sitting on a little canvas chair in the corner, which collapsed. One minute he was sitting up, about 3 feet up in the air, and next minute he was sitting on the floor. Well, I caught this out of my corner of the eye, and I think the majority of people know what I'm like when the news. I mean, anything sort of busts me up. And what with having the headphones falling apart, and then Ian trying to put them back over my head, which was the biggest failure in the world, because I don't know where he put them, but he still got them over my head, because I couldn't hear a word. And then Ian collapsing on the floor, Ian West almost falling through a window, and one little thing, sort of followed the other. And I had we recorded it, and the most diabolical newscast I've ever had in my life.
Ian, thanks, Paul. We're all lighting up cigarettes at the moment. My cigarettes are...
I'm not.
Who isn't?
I'm not.
No, Paul doesn't smoke. He's about the only lad who doesn't smoke out here. He just smelled us. Ian, by the look of you, you say that you've just suddenly thought of something.
This was one of those things like Paul's, much along the same lines, in that I think you'd have to be there to see it happening to appreciate the humour in the situation. But it happened after Nardi Mabel Hour. The same thing happened across the old studio. We had to vacate the chair in a big hurry, and the louder news reader, who I think was Wolf Byrne at the time. Whatever happened to Wolf Byrne?
No idea.
Anyway, we had to get out the chair and make room for him. And I had these thongs on. What? Thongs. They're sort of like summary footwear.
You can get them on the National Health.
And these, you can get anything on the National Health. Any disease. And my thong got caught up in all the wiring underneath the console. My foot got caught sort of in a weird, twisted position like my brain. I couldn't get out the chair. Wolf was halfway in the chair. Alan was lying on the floor beneath me.
I was not.
And this is how the news went on the air. And to listen to it, it was obvious.
It was the microphone. What about Alan? Is there a particular
this is something I can confess now. I couldn't confess it at the time, but now that we have about 36 minutes of airtime left, I can confess it now. This is one morning when I was doing the Early Bird show, and we get up just like anyone else does with alarm clocks. The thing is, this alarm clock didn't go off at the right time. I think I went into the air about 7:15, about 75 minutes late. Bright scarlet, of course, but you can't see that on the radio. Very embarrassing.
What about the effort? This happened 2 weeks ago. Now, no one knew about this either, because the quality was so good on the air. But just for a gag, our newsroom mic at the time was playing up, you see, so we thought we'd better transfer the newsroom somewhere else, just for the news service. So we installed Alan Clark, complete with roving microphone, in the downstairs toilet, and he sat on the toilet to get the 7 o'clock news. That's right, isn't that right? That's true. That's beautiful quality, too.
That is a true story. I don't know. What about Ross? I don't know if Ross has been on the station long enough to have any embarrassing situation on radio.
No. What about Paul and the kinky teaser that night? They tipped the bucket over.
Oh, yeah.
They tipped the bucket over you.
This happened quite a few times, we decided to do the kinky teaser. One night we were out on the roof, and next night I had a bath doing it, and...
Did you?
Yes, I did.
That's kinky for a start.
Anyhow, this particular night, Eric was on the station. Eric was paneling up in the studio. I was in the newsroom. I believe, Alan, you were there, correct?
Yeah,
That's it. So, we did the sort of interview round, and we showed him all about the studio and so on. And then Eric suddenly came back on the air and said, Paul, go outside and see what the weather's like. Well, being a mug, and he said it so casually, I said, okay, I'll go out. And I put one foot outside the doorway, and Philip Perkins, one of our 299 technicians, who has mysteriously left the studio now, tipped a whole bucket of water over me. So I was the biggest strip on the air then. And there was, again, dead air. You can always tell when anything happens to me because there's dead air for about 2 minutes. And I insisted somebody played a record while I went and had a tantrum in the corner quietly. But that's just one. I could go on. There have been a lot, but I don't want to be a mic hog.
I can just think of another very quick one. This happened when Paul was on the air, and before I tell you, I must explain that we have a studio here, funnily enough, And it has a window, and beneath this window, about 12 feet down, there is a little passageway, a catwalk thing. One evening, Paul was on the air, and the guilty ones this time were yours truly, Ian and Tom. The three of us went outside. We had a monitor radio with us. We heard Paul beginning to talk. He obviously had the mic open. So we swung into a good chorus of Silent Night, I think, in good King Wenceslas, right in the middle of January.
Yeah, who's most embarrassed?
It's 26 and a half minutes past the hour at 11 o'clock. We don't know what to call the programme in actual fact. We've tried to think of a name for it. I wouldn't say a shambles. We're taping it at the moment, so we'll hear the diabolical result after we've closed down for the last time. But I think a piece of music now. And Ian has had the suggestion of playing a record which I've always had to more or less tell disc jockeys, new disc jockeys, when they come out to the station. They say, what records do we play? And we tell them what kind of format to play by. Always tell them that there is a certain record which they mustn't play, and that is the Fortune singing You've Got Your Troubles, because this is a signal to our friends on shore that if we ever play this record, it means that either somebody is ill out here, very dangerously ill, or it means that something terrible has gone wrong and would we have help as soon as possible. Well, now, at one particular occasion, the person that I forgot to tell us about was Ian McRae, isn't that right? And of course, Ian McRae comes on the air and says, right now, here's a Radio City Golden Order and plays the Fortunes You've Got Your Troubles. I sort of did my tiny nut and sort of went into the loo for about 2 hours.
Well, talking about that, Tom, but nobody heard it.
Nobody heard it. But,
you think I was seriously ill at the time.
Ian has got the idea that we should play it now. Is there any particular thing that you want to add to this, Ian?
Yes. I wouldn't mind a job, so if anyone's listening...
No, just the thought is there. We thought we'd play it, but make sure, we must reassure our friends ashore that nothing at present, at this stage, is drastically wrong. Tom is just a little bit sick, but nothing to worry about, right?
31 and a half minutes now past 11 o'clock, and once again we'll point out to you, ladies and gentlemen, Radio City is not in any trouble, but we thought we'd just play that record because it's one of the least played records on Radio City for the reason we just told you. The Fortunes, You've Got Your Troubles.
Me and the lads just come out again to see if you want to be rescued.
There you go.
Hello, boys. Have a beer.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind a beer right now. Nice Foster's.
Yeah.
Nice vodka.
Great.
Like I said, lunch and
dry.
no flaming taste.
All of you, you're at the peasant's drink, that is.
Peasants, it's the best beer in the world.
Here.
Except from you. Isn't it, Graham, from Sydney?
Definitely.
Right, he should know.
Oh, the patriotism here.
Yeah, you tell him, sport.
If we could get to be just a little bit serious for a minute, lads. We knew about this summons, of course, coming up long before you did out there in Radio City listening, and we've known it for, 2 or 3 weeks now. And we've all been keeping our fingers tightly crossed because there was always sort of a slim fighting chance that we would keep on the air. It seems incredible to me, and I'm going to put my own case forward first of all, if I might, because I'll probably get into trouble for saying this, but it seems ridiculous that in June of last year, when we had all the tragic events on Radio City, in June of last year, the police told me, and they told Mrs. Calvert, and they told her late husband, Reg, that they could do nothing about the men out here for the simple reason we were outside the police's jurisdiction. Now, how is it that 6 or 7 months later, the GPO now summons us and get away with it? They win the case by saying that we are within territorial waters. Now, if the police can't help us 6 or 7 months ago, and they have still said that if the station is rated again, which is still quite possible, they still can't help us, but they can fine us £100 and they can shut us off the air. Now, this to me, and I don't profess to be sort of politically minded, but this to me, there seems to be something definitely wrong with the British law system at the present time.
And apart from this also points out that people can take a map and draw a line where they think fit, and this then becomes law. This obviously leads to the point, is British law still as respectable as it used to be? Well, as Graham says, the criterion of the world's law. Is British law becoming a mock-up and a farce? And is this country becoming, very slowly but surely, a police state?
This is quite true, in actual fact, what Ian is saying. Is there anybody else who's got strong views about this? Because if you've got strong views about it, lads, sort of say so now. Anybody else going to say anything about it?
I'm sort of starting in. Paul comes next. Just a little sideline here, actually. The public, the many millions of people who listen, not only to this station, but to all the other offshore stations. It seems to me, I'm not knocking the listeners because they've been very kind. They write in, they send gifts. I'm not knocking the listeners, but it seems to me that the public haven't really shown any concrete form of support for the stations. You know, they're going to miss the stations when they go. They certainly will. But so far to me, I don't think the public has shown any sort of support for the stations. If they want the popular music that we and the other stations are providing, I'd like to see some of the many millions of people doing something about it, you know.
Although I can't think at this stage, after Britain being used to commercial radio now for 3 years, it cannot possibly die out completely. There's a future here. There must be, because people want it.
Well, I mean, having stations on forts and ships around the coast is really a bit of a farce, you know. It should be on land, of course.
The whole thing's a farce, of course it is. Paul, any ideas?
No, well, I was just going to, in fact, Alan, I think, has almost summed it up for me. I was going to mention this, that I felt very shocked by, of course, the news as everybody had out here on the station, and I felt a bit sort of annoyed that nobody had really tried to do anything about it. I know small teams of people say, well, right, well, we're going to do this and we're going to try and do that, but nobody really has got down, and it's pretty obvious that you want these stations. I mean, right, 12 o'clock, that's the end of Radio City. Tomorrow morning, you're going to switch on your set and there's just going to be dead air there. Now, this is going to happen to other stations, and this is a fact. It's going to happen very, very quickly, and if nothing is done I should imagine, in the next few weeks or month, you're going to lose every commercial station, regardless of what large organisations such as Radio London and Caroline say over the air and in the papers and print this, that they will continue transmitting. You're going to lose them, every single station. And when 30 million people at least enjoy listening to these offshore stations, it seems, well, I think I'm a bit lost here for words, but I would feel that government is not only backward in its ideas, but it's been done like
I think if we can just at this moment, because I know she's probably listening in together with her two daughters, Candy and Susan, I think if the lads, we all sort of said good evening to Mrs. Calvert, take it from me, Mrs. C, all the lads out here, our thoughts have been with you today in Southend. You've probably had an exhausting day and you're probably feeling very tired, but our thanks to you. You've been a marvellous boss over the past few months. That's right, isn't it, lads?
Yep. Sure.
Yes, indeed. What about Ross? Ross isn't saying much. Ross, have you got any particular views? Although you haven't been in the country very long, you must have some kind of views that you want to put forward at this time.
Well, actually, I can only reiterate on what Alan and Paul have said. Being an outsider, in a way, I feel a little removed from the effects of this. But I think it just goes to show that the English people are getting more easily misled by people in higher places. I think it just goes to show that the Englishman's really losing his backbone if they can let this sort of thing happen. Because time after time, people have said, commercial radio is that we all listen, it's great, it's fantastic, yet nobody has yet been game enough outside the industry to stand up and say, we want commercial radio, and this to me is just signifies how much control the government has got over people's thoughts in England this day.
I think the most incredible thing, lads, which immediately comes into my mind, is that after all this time, which is nearly 3 years that Radio City has been on the air, of course, our faithful listeners will remember that we started up as Radio Such, but we have been on the air for 3 solid years, and it's taken the present government to take all this while to suddenly, take us off the air. 3 years, to me, seems an awful amount of time. I don't know about you.
Sorry, Paul.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, can I point out here that all the reasons that the government have been putting forward, and the Post Office too, in the past year, and the press, and so on, for not having commercial radio in this country, every reason has been one great bucket load of old codswallop.
That's a fact, yeah.
That's right. It's rubbish. The whole lot. There is no reason whatsoever why there should not be commercial radio stations based in this country, and not little tippling BBC, little council-run 5-watt jobs locally, which is just a joke anyway.
And I think something which I never realised, in actual fact, ladies and gentlemen, is something that Ian McRae pointed out to me a few weeks ago now, but I never realised it. But what is it, Ian? You tell me there's something like, everybody seems to think that in England it's just the place where there are pirate radio stations, but in actual fact, isn't this right? There are 300 pirate radio stations, in actual fact, in Europe at this present time.
That's right. We are no more pirates than they are, and this includes, we very often say, well, I love saying this, Vatican Radio is not in the agreement, neither is the complete American Armed Forces Network or the BBC-run British Forces Network. They are just as much pirating the airwaves as we supposedly are.
And in actual fact, we're giving the public, I think, which they wanted a long time, when everybody said that when commercial television was first put forward, I can remember this, everybody said, no, this isn't going to work out at all. But of course it did. More people watch independent television than the BBC 1 and 2 put together. And also, of course, now that commercial radio's come on the scene, more people listen in. And in actual fact, there's been a lot of dispute about the listening figures, but I personally think that more people listen in to offshore radio stations than the BBC put together. But it just goes to show what an influence pirate radio stations have had over broadcasting house, for the simple reason people will have noticed, and it's been said so in the press as well, that dear old auntie, you know, will pay respect to her because we should all pay fees. I personally don't. But we all pay sort of licenses. But the BBC over the past 2 or 3 years have changed their style and presentation so much. But it's still big.
Alan. I don't want the other DJs present to sort of start strangling me or anything. I think I'm sticking up for the BBC. I admire the BBC. The thing about the BBC, they've got a massive job to do, and I think they partly succeed. The Third Network, for example, is a unique radio service catering for, how should we say, minority taste, but the thing is they don't cater for mass taste. And please, once again, can I hammer home the point that Paul and RWB made, that to all of you listening right now, whether you're fans of Radio City, Radio 270, Caroline, London, what have you, if you want these stations to continue, for heaven's sake, do something about it and stick up to the stations that you support.
The point here is the BBC can exist alongside the commercial stations as it does in other countries, like in Australia with the ABC network and the commercial stations, which don't try and compete. The ABC do their job, which is aimed at minority audiences, and they're paid for by listeners' license fees. They are here for the BBC, and the commercial stations supply their own advertising, and this, of course, produces their revenue. Why not here? Why not?
If I could just butt in here, for those of you who have just joined us, it's 19 minutes before 12 midnight. This is the final 19 minutes of transmission from Radio City. As you probably know, we're being closed down at 12 midnight. All the lads have got together in the studio tonight, and we're having a conversation which I hope you're finding interesting. It's probably causing a lot of comment on shore at this present time. Enough of me. Paul, I think you've got a certain thing that you want to make public.
Yeah, I'd like to try and ask the listeners, and I'd like to get somehow a reply to this question. Why is it that the government has suddenly turned around and said, no, we're not going to have these stations, we're going to close them down? When every other country that I know has so many commercial stations, why, for goodness sake, doesn't the government suddenly turn around and say, all right, the stations that are there now, and I think there are 9 of us now that we've lost Essex, there are 9 stations, why can't we allow them on the land, let them be run by the same management, who are people who understand radio, and let's go to our station, Mrs. Coward, who's, as I said earlier on this evening, and I'll repeat, it's a woman in a million. Everyone here. I'm not saying this because I know she's listening. This is a fact. For a woman suddenly like that, who lost her husband last year, continue a radio station, is more merit than I can think fit to say. But why, for goodness sake, can't the government suddenly say, all right, on these are 9 stations going around the country at the moment. Now, why can't we come on land, pay taxes, or whatever the government wants to agree to? Because I know the management here, and Mrs. Calvert listening at the moment, will agree to this. Because all stations, I mean, not only make money, but they provide a public service, a service that the British public want and have been, well, they've been catered for them for the last 3 years. Why doesn't the government suddenly turn around and say, okay, no more stations, you come on the land, we'll allocate frequencies, and I don't want to hear any clash about the medium wave being too crowded, because it isn't.
This is funny you should just say this about the government allowing the stations to come on, because in New Zealand, at the end of last year in December, 2 pirate radio stations started up off New Zealand. And New Zealand has a pretty, they already run their radio the same way as television's run here. They have the government channel and the government commercial channel that is controlled by the government. The only thing is they have great restrictions on ads, and they don't allow ads on Sunday and all this. And 2 pirate stations set themselves up off New Zealand, and the government said, okay, you go ahead and do it. And if in 12 months you're still running and you've proved you're successful and you've got listeners, the government says, you're ashore. You can set yourself up.
This is a forward-looking government. I think, I just don't understand it quite.
This bit about taking up frequencies in the medium wave band is rubbish, as Ross says, because take, for example, the state of Victoria, which is the smallest state in Australia. Now, this has 25 commercial stations on the air, and on quite high wattage, quite high power, and these stations do not interfere with stations in other neighbouring states whatsoever.
Something which I think I will also like to butt in on here as well, because I personally get very, very annoyed at people who remark to me when they say, what do you do for a living? You say, you're a disc jockey on an offshore radio station. A lot of people say that, you're the stations that block ship-to-shore messages. Now, this is one of the items, one of the points that the Postmaster General has been putting forward in this white paper, that radio stations interfere with ship-to-shore signals. Now, I don't know much about the technical sides of radio or transmitting, But I do know for an actual fact that the technicians that we have on this station, I'm sure are just as good as the others on the various other stations, is that this just simply does not happen. The people who are being paid to look after our transmitters and to see that we put out a good, clear signal have to make quite sure that this doesn't happen, and it hasn't happened to Radio City on its present wavelength. I don't know much about the technical side of this. Perhaps if Phil Perkins, our 299 technician, is listening in, he might be able to put us right here. But this is one of the points that the GBO has put forward.
But
something which just doesn't happen.
I feel, Tom, that quite honestly, these are just feeble excuses, and the government is trying to get hold of anything they possibly can. But we can turn round, and let's speak generally for commercial radio. And it has. I know this station has saved lives. I know Radio London and Caroline have saved lives of people out there. And they're doing a public service for people who want to listen to the station. I mean, if the British population didn't want the stations, the first station that opened, or us that followed, would have collapsed, because first of all we would have no sponsors because people wouldn't listen to us. But for the sudden interest that we've caused, and people listen to it and they enjoy it, and you read this every week now in the radio news, that they enjoy the chat and the friendliness, and that they enjoy mistakes, and they like to listen to people coming in with, that it's all intimate conversation, which is something that would be lost if the government could control.
I think the most hilarious thing, which probably Ian and Alan will probably remember, and possibly you, Paul, as well, I don't know if Russ will remember this, but it was quite a few months ago, and the government, of course, was so dead set against pirate radio stations at the present time, but it was finally brought to light by the Times, I think, of all newspapers. I might be wrong here, but in actual fact, we won't mention the station, but in actual fact, a few of the backers, the advertisements which appeared, which came over the airways of this certain radio station, were government-backed.
That's right, the Egg Marketing Board.
Some oil company, wasn't it? And some oil company, the Egg Marketing Board and some oil company. These were government-backed, and the government was paying this so-called pirate radio station to put over these commercials. Well, if there isn't something funny there, I don't know what it is.
I don't think they can find really legitimate excuses, and they just... the program I saw, one of them was the Frost Report, and every single question that was put forward about the station, A, causing interference, B, being a nuisance, and every question that they could possibly think, the backers and the managing directors of the station proved beyond doubt. And I've forgotten who it was who was being interviewed.
Which was Ben, wasn't it? He was then Postmaster General. I think.
And he was ridiculed.
Shut out of the job now.
Yeah, he was absolutely ridiculed and laughed almost out of that studio.
We have a more puritanical one even now. Just for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if, I can't believe, was it Mr. Jenkins who was interviewed on the David Frost program the other week, and they had all the managing directors of various radio stations, and for some mysterious reason Mrs. Calvert wasn't asked on the program. She doesn't know why, and none of us know why, but any of the lads see this program? I think the reason why she is because she's so outspoken about it. She's honest about it. Yeah, but the thing was that, Mr. Jenkins, I think was his name. Was it Jenkins?
Present Home Secretary.
Was that Hugh Jenkins, was it?
Oh, maybe...
There was a Jenkins who was very much, not sure, I think it was Hugh Jenkins, he was very much opposed to commercial radio. He's a third program type, and because he thinks that he likes it, so everyone else should as well. Yes, but the audience in this particular television program, which David Frost does, of course, every night, he sort of said, should pirate radio stations stop, or should they be put off the air? And literally everybody in the studio audience put up their hands, but even then this chap who was being interviewed about pirate radio stations wouldn't accept the fact. Now, if somebody's going to be as stubborn as this is the battle that we are up against. You're practically up against a brick wall, and there's nothing which anybody can do about it, and this has been proven in the court case in Rochford in Southend today. But still, there we are. Should we have a piece of music, or do you lads want to sort of carry on?
I think that...
I think we should carry on, in actual fact, because it's 11 minutes before 12. We've got a round off tonight's program with the parties over, but that's not quite yet. Is there any particular subject that the lads might like to bring up now?
Yeah, I would like to. This is something that we've been talking about whilst one of the record was going. I've always made it my policy to tell every single person, I think everyone out here has made their policy, to let the listeners and come down to their sort of same level and chat generally to them. Well, yes, on other stations, others, the BBC and so on, everyone regards, well, this is a radio announcer, this guy I've got to look up to and admire him. We have, I hope, proven to our public that we're just normal people, doing a job and trying to provide it. That's not what I meant.
A little wackier, perhaps, but still normal.
But I think they prefer this.
Sure.
Everyone does. And yes. 9 times out of 10, sometimes it's good to make deliberate mistakes, and they talk about it for days. But this is not what I was getting at. What I was getting at, whilst the record was being played, the question was arose, yes, lost for words. I was asked what the lads are going to do. And it was shot down. But right in front of an open mic, I would like to ask, round the table, what people are going to do. And I gave the strangest look. I'd like to start with our senior disc jockey. Tom, I think, instead of he asking me questions, I'll ask him. Tom,
I will be quite truthful with you, Paul. Also in front of also in front of an open microphone, which it is now, is that, to be quite honest with you, mate, I have not got any job to go to for the simple reason, I think like most of the other lads as well, I have been hoping and I have been praying and I've been having my fingers crossed all day today, like all the other lads, that we would possibly come up with some kind of thing to keep us on the air. And I've, really been hoping that Radio City would be going on for quite a few more years to come. But unfortunately, this hasn't happened. And presumably, when I go back on show, of course, I will be out of work and I will have to find myself another job. And this is my own situation. I don't know about the other lads.
Tom, you haven't thought of anything at all, like something you'd like to go into?
I would like to keep in radio. I'd like to build up a career as a disc jockey. I think I've started. I'm on the first rung of the ladder, and it's a very, very long ladder. It's a long way before anybody gets to sort of star status of Jimmy Savile. Nicholas. But I have got no job to go to. I don't think any of the lads who are sitting next to me at the moment, ladies and gentlemen, have a job to go to.
If Jimmy Savile's a DJ, Harold Wilson's the Prime Minister.
Yes, but Jimmy Savile reached number one in the popularity polls, but
it cost him a lot to do it, too.
Just to depress all you lads out here, I'd like to point out that you cease being professional DJs in about 8 minutes' time. Which,
what are you going to do?
He's a nasty lad.
Well, naturally, I speak for myself. I assume everyone else feels the same. I want to stay in radio. I want to be a disc jockey. I've only been doing it, 15 months, which is nothing so far, and I want to carry on. I'm still a young man. And naturally, I shall try... What was that? Naturally, I shall try and keep in the disc jockey field.
I'm virile,
Keep in radio.
I found it.
Thank you, darling. Yes.
He comes up for second.
How about Ian McRae?
How about it? Oh, it's me. No, thanks. Well, the point is, if I've been in radio for 9 years, what else can I do now, I shall look around, of course, to see what's happening on the scene and see where the jobs are, if there are any going at all. And I perhaps will do a bit of script writing to keep the shekels coming in from films and so forth. We have a few plans in that direction. Nothing public yet, because it's all hush-hush.
Tell me it was
Be quiet. And perhaps after about September or October, I shall return home and go back to legit onshore radio where people can appreciate it properly.
Marvelous. Now, Paul, he only asked this question because I believe he's got the answer. Paul, what are you doing? What are you planning on doing?
I mentioned this earlier on, but I was just sort of sitting here wondering.
He's doing nearly press next week, I tell you.
No,
nice girl.
Let's be honest and say. You want to see Tom?
Listen, we play the bum song now.
No.
Yeah, come on. Why not?
No.
Let me just get this in.
I tell you what, in actual fact, if I could just butt in here, possibly what is happening at the present time, and the Press Association have been ringing up all the national newspapers, but possibly at this very moment, monitoring the station at this present time, would probably be all the various sort of little people in their striped suits at Auntie BBC who are probably taping this to use in their 12:30 newscast this morning, later on.
You can on this.
No, actually, Tom, this is quite true. We often rubbish the BBC, naturally enough, and I do know for a fact that individually, each member of the BBC staff listen to pirate radio and enjoy it.
I'll tell you something else in that you might not know. I know this from a very, very reliable source, and I'm certainly not going to get his name over the air.
Hello, Mum.
But the two, shall we say, major commercial stations are tuned to our station every single day, permanently.
Yeah.
And the two stations...
What about a job?
Yeah, well,
I don't know that we all listen to every other station on the earth.
Well, this is a fact. Everyone gets ideas from the others. I'm not a professional disc jockey. People on other stations, some of the Canadians and Australian people, you like to listen and see what sort of style, and...
Yeah.
Very quickly, lads, we have 5.5 minutes time left. If I can just have a quick rundown of all the people who we'd like to sort of say thank you very much indeed for the people who have worked.
I haven't told you what I'm going to do yet.
I'd like to thank, first of all, of course, Mrs. Calvert. Say hi to her two daughters, Candy and Susan. Also in the London office, Jill and John Wildman. who do a lot of hard work, also the sales staff, and of course our very competent boatman, that's Freddie Downs, who's probably listening in. Probably pleased to know Fred. And Fred and Mr. and Mrs. Pine, who of course put up the DJs when, put up with them I should say, at their house in Whitstable when the DJs come down for the night. And also, of course, not forgetting technicians Phil Perkins, Ian West, Graham Horn, Bill Price, and DJs, that's Alan, Ian, Paul, RWB, Adrian Love, and Eric Martin, who we haven't mentioned. Of course, our two lads who used to work out here as chefs, Leslie and Barry, who apparently are starting up a coffee bar in Whitstable.
Any chance? Good luck to them, too.
Yes, indeed. Good luck to Barry and Leslie and their coffee bar, which they're setting up. We shall probably be coming into the coffee bar. Not for a cup of coffee, but for a job.
Tea, mate.
Shut up and tell them what I'm going to do.
We can't do that. We've got 1.5 minutes, I think, lads, to go, so very quickly.
Paul hasn't told us what he's going to do yet, but come on, Paul, tell us. Astound us.
I haven't the vaguest notion of what I'm going to do.
Thank you, Paul. Back to you, Tom.
Okay.
I'm out of the job.
Okay. Well, thanks very much indeed, lads. This past hour, we
weren't going anywhere.
We should have made it 2 hours, in actual fact. It's 4 minutes before 12 midnight, ladies and gentlemen. I haven't rehearsed this. I don't know what to say. But for all the lads out here on Radio City, for us, at the present time anyway, the party really is over. And the time right now on Radio City, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly 12 midnight. So from Alan Clark.
Well, what can you say? Simply goodbye and many thanks to everyone. I've enjoyed my spell on Radio City and keep in touch, okay?
Paul Kramer.
Thank you, Tom. I'd like to say a very good night to everybody and thank them for a most enjoyable 10 months, and I hope that the listeners do something anyway to get us back on the air, because tomorrow morning, when you switch on, there'll be nothing on 299.
RWB.
Thanks very much, Tom, Paul, Alan, Ian, and everyone. I've had a great time. I've learned a terrible lot about what people can do under extreme conditions, and I've really enjoyed myself. I'm looking forward to something in the future. I don't know what at this stage. And for me, it's fine.
Ian McRae.
Well, just goodbye and good morning, and thanks for everything from the past. Been wonderful listeners. Without sounding too sentimental here, all the best of luck to you, and goodbye for now. We'd like to, just very quickly, if I can here, Tom, perhaps, I know the other stations are listening to us right now. We'd like to sort of pass on any sort of goodbye messages. We'll listen to them after we go off the air in a few minutes' time, okay?
Fine.
Bye for now.
Right, well, many thanks indeed to all the lads, and of course our 2 technicians on duty at the moment, Graham, and also to Phil, and also our 2 DJs on shore at the moment, Adrian and Eric, and our other technicians, Bill and Ian West. For me, Tom Edwards, for the very last time on Radio City, it's a very good night to you, ladies and gentlemen. God bless, and thank you for being a marvellous audience. Good night, and goodbye.